One of the things that I really like to talk about and has really been, I think, my own life's journey because there was so much trauma from early on. And there was kind of the expectation of how life should be, especially when my dad died as a kid. And, I was like, like, why me? That was the question. I think on the way to the funeral, I was like laying my head on my dad's lap, on my aunt's lap. Oh gosh, my dad's lap, and my aunt was like stroking my hair, and I remember just saying or asking, why me? And we have like this idea of how life should be, and it could be a really beautiful one, right? It's almost like we're not wrong for having that idea, but then I guess in the greater sense we are, because just like a year or two before my dad died, I remember like the thought crossing my mind, like I could I can never imagine my life without my dad. That was my thought. And lo and behold, a year or two later, my dad died just, unexpectedly. I had no idea that was, that he was going to. And so, for many years after he died, I really struggled with my expectations of life. I also struggled with my expectations of my mother, because after he died, my mother's behavior just significantly worsened, and it was not good before that. And so there was a lot of it was just a difficult hand, to hold, in this life. That's all. It was just difficult. It was just a difficult hand. And so one of the things that I in my life, I think, just from probably from the time I was born, and I experienced my mother, right, and just severe trauma on her end, and therefore severe lack of connection, to herself, and of course, to her child, to me. And so I think just from the very beginning, life was sort of, implanting in me the seed to release my expectation, to release expectation. And it's almost like my entire life, right? All of the suffering that I've, experienced, right, came from the idea of life should be a certain way. My mom should be a certain way. People should be a certain way. My partner should be a certain way. I should be a certain way. I should be a certain way. And what I didn't know was that even the belief that I should be a certain way, right, was rooted in fear, was rooted in the way that I was taught that I needed to survive in my relationship with my mother. And so I believed that I needed to be kind, because I needed to be kind to her. I needed to cater to her emotions. And I also believed that I needed, and these are subconscious beliefs, of course, all belief occurs in the subconscious mind. And so there was the belief also that I needed to cater to other people's emotions, even though I didn't understand that these were beliefs of mine, but my life was playing out this way. And so I would do this, with my partner. I would do this in like all my relationships, of course, my relationship with my mother, and anytime, that I would think of her, or like, interact with her, like, there was just so much processing, right, that was just happening here all the time, because, I was always trying to understand, right, emotion, behavior. And I think really that was, a huge help, and what really sparked my curiosity and fascination into children's behavior, right, into child behavior, and into child psychology, and how children thrive. So it was really helpful for me, in my encounters with children, because I just experienced massive, like just wild, like beyond my imagination success in just my encounter with one child, right, in the change that I was able to like transmit and implement within them. Just remarkable. And I really think it's because there was just significant trauma early in my life, where I literally had to become a psychologist with my mom, like just literally read and understand her every mood, gesture, facial expression, and behavior, tone of voice, everything about her. I really became like an expert on in that way in any human being. And what's crazy about that is there's just, when you start to pick up on all these things, right, you don't know that it's really just out of a state of hypervigilance that's rooted in fear, right? All you know is just how you are, right? You don't know how you are is just how you are. You're not thinking, oh my gosh, you have no way of knowing that this behavior is, this kind of tendency of yours, this inclination to understand or to, help people, other people emotionally, right? You have no idea. You have no way of knowing that this is really, it's really just a survival mechanism, that was born in you, right, at an early age. And so I went through much of my life just, in this pattern. And it's kind of would make up like the thoughts that were, play here, and the thinking that I would experience, and like my curiosity and fascination. But how it really held me back was it kind of, my focus was so much on this, right, that I couldn't actually tell that, that it was rooted in fear. And so when I actually did so much of the significant healing in the last 3-4 years that I mentioned a lot, what happened is, like, I almost was, I got the chance to be restored to normal, right, to neutral, as in not having this tendency and inclination, which I then began to see. I only got to see through this experience of healing and awakening, right? It's only then that I really got to see that there was a severe, this tendency was a severe imbalance. It was an imbalance. It was an over vigilance. It was a hyper vigilance. It was like an over preoccupation with emotions and behavior of other people, because this is really what I had to do with my mom. My mom had significant trauma, just completely lacking, right, in awareness of her emotion and awareness of her behavior. So of course, I became an expert, at these things, and I became an expert very, very quickly. Started picking up things, but the thing is, like, at the same time that I was picking up these things, right, in every encounter, like, in every interaction that I was having with everybody, right, there was also like a pervading anxiety in my body all the time. And in hindsight now, right, because that anxiety is gone, right, in the last 3-4 years, and all the healing that I've done, right, there was an anxiety in me that I remember even as a child, right? And I don't really remember the sensation in my body, but my mom says that, before I would perform on stage, I used to perform a lot as a kid. She said that I would, it was very common, I would frequently be in the bathroom before, my performance. They would call my name, and, I'd be in the bathroom. And I do remember memories of that, of being in the bathroom, and that, really is like, anxiety for me has, like, significantly manifested in my stomach area. And so, it makes sense when I, put all the pieces together, that there was anxiety in me from, a young age. And that's tough, right? Like, sometimes I think about, like, I just have bits and pieces of memories from my life, right? And maybe that's a good thing, but, even things that I remember, just, sometimes it's very difficult. Like, it just breaks my own heart. And it's also the reason that I do this work today, because what I've endured, like, is, it's just, it's a hand that I wouldn't, I even, my dad dying, like, was one thing. That was tremendously difficult, but experiencing my mother and experiencing her over and over again for, 30 years before I finally, like, woke up into, this process of healing and waking up more into my truth. That work, right, is not something that I would wish on anybody. And I think about, like, our children that I love, like, so young and so innocent, right? And I think for me, like, the biggest thing was that it was uncovering not only just my joy and my peace, right, and of course my truth, right. It completely buried my brilliance, my potential. It covered my potential. And that's what trauma does. Trauma becomes like, it's just blinders. You're wearing blinders, right? And you can only focus on like that your trauma is your focus. You're not capable of seeing anything else, because trauma is like literally you're in survival mode. And so many of us go through trauma and we don't heal properly, right? And and so what happens is that those blinders just, become our conditioning. Like, this is how we operate. This is our new operating principle, right? This is how we look at the world. This is how we behave, right? We behave as the person that, that we needed to be in the traumatic situation or in the traumatic relationship. And so, and the thing is, we don't even know it. And that's really like the unconditional, like, gift of trauma, like the unconditional love part of it, is that, we become the trauma fully, right? The brain just, it doesn't even adopt that new personality or that new identity, that new behavior or way of being or thinking. It literally becomes it fully. And so that's why, when you meet somebody who has trauma, like we just say, like, you could just say, like, they're asleep, or just people that experience conditioning, right? That are, you walk around and you see like people that are completely like, very much unaware of their emotions and their behavior. They're asleep, right? Because something in their life put them asleep and they haven't woken up yet, right? And that whatever, could have put them asleep could have been, significant pain, right? And it doesn't mean that it justifies their behavior, of course, right? But just, it is like looking at it for what it is, for what I'm saying, right? That there's something in their life, right? That fear, that that caused pain, and that they didn't deal with properly. And the fact that they don't even know, how they're coming across or how they are, they're not aware of their behavior. And so, what happens in the moment when you encounter somebody like this, right? It's sort of like, not like a planned situation where you're like, I'm going to tell that person or I'm not going to tell them about their behavior. It just kind of unfolds in the moment, whatever feels true, whatever just happens organically in the moment, I guess. And so, but this trauma really is the root, like pain is the root of all of the, the troubled behavior that we see, not just in our children, not just in ourselves, but in the world, in every single human being. And the root of pain is just fear. It's just fear. And I'm really grateful to have gone through the healing journey and the awakening journey of, the period of 3 to 4 years in my life to really come into such intimacy with this fear, because it really is like I experienced it over and over, thousands and millions of times in the 4 years almost that I've spent sitting, of just the sensation of fear just in the body. And there's the experience of fear in the body, and then thought pops up in the mind, right? And that's happening every moment, the experience of fear in the body. And the more and more you do this work, right, the more the safer your body feels, right? So the safer your nervous system feels, right? Because at one point, in order to survive, it had to shut off like most of like feeling, right? Just to protect you. And so it's brilliant in that way. But as you do this work and you sit with yourself, right, the more you feel, right, the more safer your body feels, the more safer your nervous system feels, and the more it kind of opens up to be able, like, has more space to then feel more things, feel deeper things, feel bigger things, feel more difficult things, right? And often what happens is it gets worse before it gets better, right? And so one of the things, like, that happens when it gets worse is that it starts to imagine fear and have the experience of fear in every moment. So literally in every moment there's fear, right? And that's, when you get really intimate with your mind and your body, this is what happens, right? There's, in every experience, there's a moment of fear, a thought comes. Next moment, a moment of fear, thought comes. And you're probably, trying to imagine right now, what's there to be fearful of in every moment, right? But again, like the subconscious mind, right, that has been accumulating fear all throughout our life, right, is playing thoughts every moment, right? Like, 90% of the thoughts that we experience on a daily basis, right, are being fed to us from our subconscious mind. And life, like, the mind is always learning, right? In every moment it's learning, right? And so it makes sense, like, okay, the subconscious mind is also learning too, right? And of course the subconscious mind is learning because it's the most vigilant part of the mind, right? It's a survival part of the mind. It's the fear, like it's looking for fear. Like, fear is like the most important thing, like, when it comes to surviving, right? So of course it's going to be like the most important part of the mind that's learning, right? And so every moment in our life, right, it's learning. And It's learning how to be or how not to be or what it needs to do or what, like, how things are, how people are, how I should be, what I should do, right? And so it sort of has like this grip and this control over life, right? And that's the identity. That's the one who's telling the story from moment to moment about everything that's happening. And so really, this work of just sitting with the self. And this is something that I always recommend to anybody, right? Parent, adult, child, no child, child in any capacity in your life or not, right? Always doing this work of being with yourself. And you don't have to leave what you're doing, right? You don't have to have a period of sitting like I did in your life, right? If you have a young child or if you have children or you have like a really busy life right now, right? You don't need to leave it at all, right? Because you are always with your mind, right? So I don't have to stop what I'm doing, right? When I'm washing my dishes, right? When I'm making my bed, when I'm, cleaning, when I'm in the shower, when I'm brushing my teeth, actually every moment, even when I'm learning, right? I'm with my mind. And so I can pay attention and just look at what, I'm experiencing here. What is happening here, right? All I have to do is just look. And it takes some conscious effort at first kind of to train ourselves to do this, because we've kind of just been so habituated to like looking outside, being distracted, going to the mind, like, being distracted by thought, being lost in thought. Like this is probably the most common one, right? And so even if you're not like using your phone that much or like, distracted by like external things, you're distracted up here. And so really just training yourself, right? There's the conscious part of you, right? The one, the conscious part is the one that's present, right? The one that's like, okay, when you have a conversation with somebody or you meet somebody, that's the one that's just present, right? He's not thinking, right? And so he's just here. And when you're present, you just experience clarity, right? You just experience like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm here in the room, right? The walls are blue, right? Like I'm clear in my mind. And so that's what we mean by, our conscious mind, right? In our conscious mind, we're not really experiencing thought, observable thought, right? In the way that, our subconscious mind, kind of like, we experience like the thoughts of our subconscious mind, where thought comes up and it's like, it's a story or it's like an image or it's like a mental movie, like it's very vivid. We don't really experience thought like that, when we're conscious, like from our conscious mind. And so it's our conscious mind, right, that literally is the one that is going to pay attention now, right, and look at the subconscious mind, look at the sort of like that fear-based mind within us. And we can also call that the personal mind, right, because it's the personal mind, it's this part of the mind that sort of has like, it's the personal world. It's like all the narratives and the characters and the stories, like, about everything that you encounter like on a daily basis, and the people that you meet and the people in your life, and like it's just the personal world, right? So the part of us that's present, that's just here, that's like empty and spacious and happy, and peaceful, right? This part, right? When we're doing an activity, right? Like washing the dishes, right? And we're present, right? We're gonna now look at this part of our mind, right? That has like these thoughts, like these personal thoughts. And that's how you just know, like, okay, they're personal thoughts, or I'm suffering from them. They give me anxiety. They make me feel, not good, they make me feel bad inside. And another really great opportunity is, as soon as your mind gets like, chattery, right? As soon as like you notice like, oh my gosh, like the volume in my mind has been turned up, right? It's very noisy in here. That's your perfect opportunity, right? That is the perfect opportunity to then look at like what stories, what thoughts, what beliefs might be coming up, and to really look at them. And this act of, looking is so powerful. It's the most powerful one that we have in really reclaiming our mind, right? And reclaiming our power and returning to living in our body and living in our heart. Because again, we've been so habituated to living in the mind, right, that it's going to take this kind of conscious effort to then look, right, and to kind of pierce through, like, because the more that we look with our conscious mind, right, we've kind of been, the subconscious mind has become us, right? We've become the subconscious mind. But the more we look with the conscious mind, right, we return back to presence. Like the more space starts to grow in the conscious mind, right, the conscious part of us, right, and we start to inhabit more and more like conscious space within our being, right? And so of course, like the more conscious we become, the less and less unconscious we become. The personal mind, subconscious mind grows smaller and smaller and smaller. And this really is the work of our lifetime, right? There could be a bulk of a period where you do a concentrated amount of work, right, where you're really just tremendously focused on this, right? And then you start to return back to work or the world or society, right? But this still continues. And so whatever your situation, whatever your circumstance, I will always tell you, right, that if your heart is seeking truth, right, if you're looking to return back to presence, if you're looking to live in your heart again, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, I experienced so much noise and suffering, and I can't get my husband to do that, or I can't get my child to do that, or my mother-in-law is horrible, or whatever is going on for you, right? You don't have to leave any of your world, right, as it is, to be here in your heart, because again, you're always in your body. You always have access to what's going on in your mind. You always have access to what's going on in your body, right? Paying attention to any sensation that you might be experiencing. And when you come out of, let's say you do have a long period of sitting, right? What you realize is that as you're coming out of it, you realize, oh my gosh, I'm doing now many of the things that I used to do. I'm moving and grooving, right? I'm returning, back to being really busy. But now what's happening is that, oh my gosh, I'm busy, but I'm still here. I'm still present, right? I'm still with my mind, I'm still in my body. I'm sensing everything, experience that's happening internally. And so often what happens is just a short period of just having to slow down, right? In order to give this conscious effort and attention to pay this attention, right? Because sometimes when we do the other things, that other thing is a distraction, right? That washing of the dish is a distraction, right? Or that that work, or it could be anything in your life that is the distraction from being with yourself, at least in this initial stage of doing this work. And so I also just want to remind you, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, I have a young child, or I have I can't leave my responsibilities, you absolutely don't have to. Because if your heart is seeking this truth, right, if your heart is seeking truth, then life will afford the opportunity for you and the circumstance for you. You don't need to worry, right? Even if you do the looking, again, while you're washing the dishes, right? However this opportunity can be afforded to you in your current circumstance, you will have it. You will have it. If that's even looking in the shower, or 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, in the morning. Something that I really like to do was wake up early and just meditate, and I would do that. I think when I, started doing this inner work, I was doing it for 3 hours in the morning, 3 to 6 hours. I mean, that was my first initiation into this, healing journey, this awakening process, right? And then just now, very recently, I'm on I'm almost completing 4 years, right? The meditation has become an hour, right? Instead of 6 hours or 6 to 10 hours all day of just doing nothing, right? But meditating, or just sitting and being with myself. So, but that's just my case, right? And again, I want to tell you that if you have a really busy life, or you can't afford that kind of time, that kind of sitting, just not to worry about it all, because that kind of sitting will be given to you in your movement, in your activity, in your motion, in your current life, and even in the 5 minutes that you give to this, even the 5 minutes that you're able to give this. What this is really is a pursuit of truth by the heart. It is the heart's pursuit of truth. And so you have to know, right? The heart supersedes everything. And the heart doesn't require any time at all, right? So even if you just have 5 minutes, right? That's all you need. That's maybe all that you need in your situation, right? In your case, in your life, right? In your scenario, in your being. That's maybe, and if that's all that you have, that's all you need. And that I can guarantee. If it's all you have, it's all you need. And life is really gracious and bountiful and abundant in that aspect. So really just to have the earnest desire, right? To be with yourself, to look, and to return to your heart, to return to living in your heart, where there's just peace, presence, and truth. And I think for me, truth really was the pursuit that I was on. At least, when I first embarked on this kind of journey to get to know myself, although subconsciously, peace is a journey that I was on for many years, maybe all my life. There was just like a seeking of like relief, because it's only in hindsight now that I can tell uh, there was definitely a restlessness and an anxiety that pervaded my entire being, maybe all my life, right? And just because now in my body it feels so different, there isn't any anxiety. And sometimes it can come like in a moment, right? Like fear can come in a moment, but and I'll experience that, and I can experience it, for maybe a few seconds or a minute, right? But it's not like the moment to moment anxiety that sort of underlied my entire life before. And so I think peace is truly what I was seeking inside, and what I can't, like what I thought I was, or the pursuit that I was on mentally, was truth. And my heart also desired truth too. So maybe they are one and the same. Maybe it is all the same, and I like to believe that it is. So like the journey of just being myself, because when I was really young, I had to completely abandon who I was, just to be who my mother needed me to be. And so there was no shard, no remnant, no drop of me here, like absolutely none. Absolutely none. None. And so, when I did this really healing, intense healing of 3 to 4 years, it was really, towards the end of it, like in the last, few months, where there's like there's an integration phase, right, of healing, and there's also an embodiment phase of healing. And maybe it was during the integration phase that I started like just getting like a even then, I can't really say. I think it was like the embodiment phase, literally like the last few months, where I just started like getting like a felt a sense of my presence, right? So when I'm here in the body, I can actually feel like physically what that feels like, right? Just like just a sense of me, and it's like just a sense of here-ness, and it could encompass include like a sort of like like right now when I tuned in, there's like a sort of like vibration in the body, like from the energy, I guess. Just there's just we are energy beings, we're made of energy, and so it does include that, right? But even without that, there's just like a sense of here-ness, right? I could tell I'm here. And I never experienced this before. And so and I think though I can't really remember it like off the top of my head, there are things, and so many things, that I've learned about myself, like in the last few years, like I guess also like the integration phase, and sometimes, like, and I can only really say like that, the things that I've learned about myself are just like things that are current right now, right? So I think, and maybe in comparison to how I was before, like before there was a period of time where I was like really trying to, I don't think I ever was like really like super organized, maybe when I was like a really young child, but I don't know if that was like people pleasing tendency. I don't know. I do remember I used to like organize my shelf where I had all my stuffies and my desk. I think I was like very organized when I was like a young child, or even in elementary. My mom said like to brush my hair every night, like things that she wouldn't have to tell me to do. It just sounded like I was a really good girl. And just like would do a lot of things without being told. But as in my 20s, when I started living with my partner, I don't think I was ever like really that organized, although I tried to be, because there was like an idea that I wanted to be, but I don't think I ever succeeded. No, I don't think so. And then after I did, like when I was alone, this was like after 10 years of living with my partner, I was alone for 3-4 years. That's when I did my healing journey, and the awakening process. And then after the third year, I moved back home to be with my mom. And so my mom gave me her bedroom just graciously, like out of her heart, like just so incredible, like. And she's been sleeping in the living room. And so one of the things that, that she noticed, right, and I think that, we both, is that, I guess she pointed it out, was that that I'm not that organized, right? And then that in my life, and I was just telling her, I was like, I used to stress a lot about these things before, and I no longer. And so like my natural being just now isn't very organized, like in the way that I keep myself. I'm not really, I don't really clean that much, or like, it'll happen, right? It'll happen from time to time, but I guess compared to how I used to be, or what I wanted, for myself, or the idea that I had for myself, like having a cleaning routine every day and all that stuff, like, I mean, there is like, some stuff here or there, like I'll wipe things down every, day, but it's very nuanced. And I think this is like the thing with everybody, right? Even noticing my mom, like, I think she has like some like tendencies to be like, very overly clean with certain things. And I realized, oh, it's just so nuanced with everybody. Like, it's just the way that they are, right? And so, and you realize this more and more, like as you awaken it and as you heal, like, oh my gosh, this is just like everybody is just so unique. This is just the way that they are, right? It's just the way that they are. That's it. And it could just be the way that they are at this moment or at this time, right? And we're capable of change. And that's what's so beautiful about, consciousness. When we're doing things like, from our conscious mind, like we're free flowing. So there's room to always change, right? But it's interesting to see, like, how certain beings just, are, like, how a being like me keeps their room, right? Like not the most organized, it's just interesting. And when you don't have any idea or attachment or fear around it, it's the more interesting it is. It's just interesting. Um, and so, I want to say that there are certain things that I just started like, learning about myself, but maybe in comparison to like the ideas or things that I was striving, for earlier in my life. Um, but but I guess just like in the last few months, I realized that I don't like to rush, right? I do like to take my time, right? And I don't have to say I don't like to rush. I could just say I like to take my time, like before leaving. I just like to like move slowly. And I think just being present, like it's almost like today, like, before I came to the library to, record this video, I really didn't even look at the time, but I knew I had the library at a certain, this room at a certain time. And but I didn't look at the time when I was, getting ready. I didn't look at the time when I was leaving the house. But I think I sort of put my phone in my bag and was pack my backpack, and I realized, oh, it was exactly a half hour. It was exactly like a good time to leave. And so life really takes care of itself. And you really understand and experience this more and more. The more you awaken, the more you heal, because you sort of just trust. You just trust, right? You're no longer operating from like, the operating principle that was anxious and, always rushing before, and I really think like, I remember times when I used to really be on time, or, I would stress about this stuff, like even just about time, like I wanted to leave on time. I think that's like a normal thing, like for people. I think it's common, right? Like you want to leave the house on time so you can get to your appointment on time, right? And like it's funny because the things that I wanted, like even back then, like I didn't, I would leave like late and like, be rushing to the library, and and just always be stressed, even if I was like, walking really fast, and I got to the library, managed to get to the library on time, right? It's like I was always restless and anxious inside. And so I think that really is like, that's the difference in doing this work, in spiritual awakening, in trauma healing, in awakening, in just pursuing your heart's truth, right? The difference is that the restlessness and the anxiety inside, right? All of the psychological suffering that you experience, even like on a very, like it doesn't have to be like, on a grand scale, like a significant like mental condition like OCD or PTSD or anxiety or depression. Doesn't have to be a big deal necessarily, but just even the suffering that you experience in like, overall in your life, or like, in moments, or, whatever. It doesn't have to be, to such a grand scale. Even that, right? Even that gets to clear out, and just sort of all just becomes neutral. It just neutralizes, and just clarity, just presence, right? It all dissolves. And so, this work is, it's truly, truly life-changing. And releasing our expectations is something that, it will ultimately help you release all expectations that you have of your life, of yourself, right? And when you release expectations of yourself, you will release the expectations of other people simultaneously. And so anytime you look at another person, you're like, oh, they have, they should be this way, they should be that way. You can literally, it's like a mirror into yourself, and you can sort of look at within yourself where that expectation is coming from, right? Because the moment, you don't even have to know exactly where, you don't have to exactly trace it, right? But the moment that you know, okay, this is coming from myself, that's your freedom right there. That's your freedom, because now you know this thing exists in you, right? I can either go with it or I don't have to, right? I have that freedom. It's no longer controlling me. And of course, now my child is free of that too, because I don't have to project my expectation on them.